This is a Socialist News and Views special interview.
I'm Nick Schillingford, coming to you from the Urban Cabin Studios in South Minneapolis with this special interview. So yeah, let's just jump in on Socialist News and Views. We let folks introduce themselves. Do you guys want to just let the audience know who you are?
Okay, I'm Hisham Arafat. I'm Syrian Kurdish journalist from Rojava, and I've been covering the war in Syria and Iraq since the beginning, more than 10 years, almost in English. And currently I'm working as a consultant for Amnesty International. And the latest thing I did last year, I got the international award, international journalism from Reuters, Schork award.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, that's it. And I was just reading the latest news on Syria. Things are changing dynamically in Syria, actually.
Quickly,
A
yeah.
lot of news, yeah, quickly. Yeah. And
Lucas?
I'm happy to hear the others who is in still the meeting. Yes, Lucas. It's been a long time. I haven't seen you.
Yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, my name is Lucas Chapman. I have worked in Northeast Syria for many years, and from the end of 2019 was working as a journalist, at first with the English section of the North Press Agency, and then became the editor for that section for a couple years, and then after that I started working freelance. And I was there until when was that? 2023? Yeah, fall of 2023. So many years.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the first starting point, is just Assad fled Syria, and that whole process, I think, at the very least, happened faster than anybody was expecting it to happen. So I'd be interested to hear from both of you, like right when that happened, right when you heard that Assad had fled the country, that the government had collapsed. I mean, what were your immediate thoughts at that moment? Like, what were you worried about? What were you excited about at that moment? And did you expect this to happen at some point, or was the whole thing a surprise? How were you feeling like when you first found out about the fall of the Assad government?
I can start on this one. I'll just keep it brief. I mean, I think for me, it was surprising and it was not surprising, because being there since 2019, for example, during and this is something that Hisham, I think, can also testify to,
Sure.
Watching the invasion of Syria, and hearing that, yeah, the Syrian regime army is going to come in, right? Okay, so it's not just the Syrian Democratic Forces anymore, and here they come, and they're here to defend, to defend against the Turkish invasion, and seeing how it wasn't this strong national army that I think anyone expected. So I think that for many, many years, the Syrian regime had been quite weak. It was already weakened by many years of war. It was absolutely rife with desertions, avoidance of conscription, low morale. A massive population of the country is emigrating, living elsewhere. And the regime was being propped up by two major backers, which was Russia and Iran. They were kind of weekend at Bernie's-ing, if you will, the regime. So by 2024, Russia is knee-deep in Ukraine, and Iran is distracted by a war with Israel. And so I think that when HTS began this offensive on Aleppo, Assad needs help, and Russia and Iran decide, you know what, this time you're on your own. I think that at that point, for whatever reason, Assad had outlived his usefulness to them, um, and they decided to let it go. So I think it was a little surprising because you conceive of this national army as, oh, this is like the strong, the backbone. And of course, prior to December 2024, the narrative was Assad had won the war, right? He was being welcomed back into the Arab League after years of being boycotted basically by the world. He was starting to meet with foreign leaders and stuff like this. And then all of a sudden there's this offensive on Aleppo. But at a certain point, the speed didn't really surprise me anymore, because I'm seeing that, okay, the powers that were propping up this army are no longer propping up this army. So of course these demoralized soldiers, there were many reports of entire units just kind of throwing down their guns and saying, okay, we're not going to fight. So that was my kind of perspective of it.
Hisham, did you have any thoughts? How were you feeling at the moment that, you found out that Assad regime had collapsed?
Actually, it was sudden, a surprise. I don't know what to call it. I mean, no Syrian was expecting that the Syrian regime will collapse. Maybe I can like relate this feeling and the feeling of every Syrian to the beginning of the Syrian war. At the beginning of the Syrian war, it was between only two parts, like government and opposition, and the international community, the Western countries, immediately they supported the opposition, led by the United States. But within less than 2 years, it turned out that this opposition was almost Islamist, Islam Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, all these groups. So, and of course, the emerging of the Kurdish third party, let's call it, third force in Syria. This changed the old dynamics, and the international community, let's say, stopped supporting that opposition. And at the same time, Russia and Iran, when they supported Syrian regime, and as Lucas said, even recently, many Arab countries started normalizing with the Syrian regime. So for the memory of every Syrian, it was impossible to collapse. And especially when the last fight started from Aleppo, everybody was thinking that only the countryside of Aleppo will be controlled by the opposition forces, which is something happening in the Syrian war many times, withdrawal and control and etc. But the first moment when Aleppo was controlled, we didn't believe that the regime will collapse. And after that, Homs, Hama, and then Homs, and then some other cities. And still, at the night of the collapse, nobody believed that. And at that night, I was totally exhausted from the news and from following up the news, and I fell asleep for a few hours. And in the early morning, my friend woke me up saying, wake up, the regime collapse. And I didn't believe, actually. I said, no, it's impossible. How does it collapse? There is Russia there in the coastal cities like Latakia and Tartus and Damascus. I mean, at least these three cities remain under the Russian. So it was out of a sudden. For the majority Arab Muslim Sunnis, it was a big event. But for the Kurds, it's the same. Actually, it was not a celebration. Yeah, because the Kurds already they have bad experience with the Turkish-backed rebels, Turkish-backed oppositions since the occupation of Afrin 2018, Serikaniye, and 2019. So for me as a Syrian Kurd, for any Syrian Kurd, it was not that big event actually, but it was more heavy burden actually. We are now very concerned about the future, of course. So this is, sorry, the first impression. It was a bit long, but no, I tried to relate it to the beginning, and that's it.
No, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, as you mentioned. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different groups. And even within those groups, like when I was trying to do my research originally, which I basically failed at because I don't have the background, I was looking into the different militias, and they're made up of different militias, and they're made up of different groupings. So it's like you go down this whole rabbit hole, and if you don't have the understanding, it makes it really hard to gain a perspective. I know there was a lot of people that came out like right away that have know nothing about Syria, with very clear pronouncements on what this means and where this is going. So it's been like so that was December 8th. So we're looking at like we're coming up on a month since that happened. I think some of the worst predictions maybe didn't come true or anything like that, but also Israel has been continuing to to bomb sites. Turkey has been posturing aggressively, and I don't know where the situation is with that. Where are we at right now? As far as you to understand, what's changed over the last month? Are there positive signs? Anything good? Anything bad? What are you seeing in this past month that gives you some indication of where things might be going in the near term?
Before I answer that, just one other thing I wanted to add there.
Yeah.
It wasn't, there were definitely celebrations in the Kurdish areas. I mean, in Kamishlo and Hasakeh, for example, they destroyed all the statues of Assad and tore down all his pictures. And for me, this was surreal because having like seen these cities and been in these cities since 2016, 2017, that this was just like it was like not an institution, but this was here, right? This is the regime place, and this is the SDF place or the EPG place where you don't go.
Right.
So there was definitely celebrations, and I think it was very bittersweet for a lot of people, especially those that had been arrested from the beginning of the Syrian civil war. You're seeing on social media and Facebook posts, we found this guy, or here's a list of names of people from the prisons in Damascus, the prisons in Homs. And you have started to have people coming back from these prisons, or unfortunately, the news that your child was killed in the prison or your child is missing. So I think I maybe Hisham would agree, maybe not, but I think it's very bittersweet because the regime also, and I think that this is a criticism that gets leveled at the Kurds and the autonomous administration a lot is, oh, well, you're pro-regime, just because they have issues with the Turkish-backed militias that, oh, you guys just love the regime and you're pro-Assad. And this is completely ludicrous because from decades before the revolution in Rojava, Kurds were being arrested and imprisoned. And until now, many of them are still missing, or many of them have been found dead, or they've been found in these prisons. So I think that it was like, bittersweet for them in this kind of way. As for the situation now, so the regime fell. The areas that were formerly under the regime fell under the control of mostly Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and also some areas in the north from the Syrian National Army, which is this coalition of Islamist-aligned rebel groups backed by Turkey. The Syrian National Army has occupied the Afrin region in the northwest since 2018, and also Serikani and Tel Abyad, also in the north since 2019. And I think this fall of the regime and the offensives of HTS gave them a chance to start their own offensives. So nearby the Afrin region, they south of Afrin, in region between Afrin and Aleppo called Shahaba. After the invasion of Afrin, there were 5 camps set up in this region, and you had tens of thousands, approximately 100,000 refugees that were living in these camps and in the towns and villages in this region. So when the HTS offensive happened to take Aleppo, simultaneously the SNA, the Syrian National Army, invaded Shahaba. They displaced a lot more people. Most of these people were displaced. A lot of them ended up in Tabqa, in Raqqa. Some of them made it all the way to Jazeera. Unfortunately, a lot of them were not able to leave. So a lot of them, they either had nowhere to go, or they couldn't make with one of these convoys, because even convoys of refugees that were trying to escape were being attacked. So this area is now under the occupation of the SNA as well. And then after this, they continued to push to the east, and they took the city of Manbij, which was under the control of the SDF since 2016 when they kicked out ISIS. And this was maybe 4 or 5 days of fighting around Manbij. And then the SDF made the decision to withdraw, after which the SNA took over. They're still there in Manbij, and they continue to push even further east. And this coincided with Turkey and the SNA making threats to take the city of Kobani, which is a very symbolic city. It's a city of the symbolic resistance against ISIS. If you were paying attention to the region in the news in 2014, 2015, about how ISIS was expelled from Kobani by the YPG. There's been massive troop buildup and armor mobilization on the border until now. There's threats against Kobani. So what happened is the SNA has amassed troops on 2 choke points. So the SNA is still to the west of the Euphrates on the Manbij side. In order to go to Kobani, they need to cross the Euphrates at one or both points. To the north is the Karakozak Bridge, and then to the south is the Tishreen Dam. They have carried out offensives to attempt to cross both of these bridges. So far, they failed, and the SDF has managed to repel these advances. As of now, that's where the situation is holding. The SNA has amassed a lot of troops. The SDF has amassed a lot of troops. The US has said for their part that they have negotiated a ceasefire between Turkey and the SDF. They said it's holding. Depends on what your definition of holding is, right? There's still a lot of drone strikes, artillery shelling back and forth, attempted infiltrations, attempted advances. But the coalition is in Kobani. So they've been in Raqqa and Kobani, which is a place that they really haven't had much involvement in since 2019, during Trump's troop withdrawal. But so far they are there in Kobani, and their claim is that they are attempting to mediate talks between Turkey and the SDF.
Hisham?
Actually, I fully agree with Lucas. He is following up every bits and detail on the ground, actually. Yeah, exactly. The collapse of the Assad regime has led to a power vacuum, actually, and this power vacuum, it's not only the collapse of the regime, actually. The waiting for the new U.S. administration. I mean, there is still, like, let's say 20 days or 1 month from the 8th of December till the 20th of January, I think, the new U.S. administration will be starting. So every faction on the ground, they are trying to get some piece of the cake. This is what the Syrians are usually say now, especially what Lucas talked about, the Turkish-backed factions, the SNA, Syrian National Army, who occupied Afrin and Serikaniye. Now they are trying to take more areas, actually, and of course they intensified attacks around Manbij, Tishreen Dam, and even on Kobani. And they are maybe they are thinking this way. They think in this vacuum, whatever they control, they will be negotiating over it. So and at the same time, I think very important thing now emerged yesterday or the 2 days before, which is the ISIS attacks recently in the United States. They are planning to make it in Europe, in many areas, actually. And this is, of course, reflected to some extent in the situation in Syria. And the situation in Syria, it's Turkey. Turkey is competing, trying to take over the most parts of Syria, and even now the latest piece of news now I'm reading, the defense ministry of Turkey are negotiating with Damascus. They have communication with Damascus, and this is one of the things. So Turkey is planning to make bases around Homs and Damascus, and at the same time the US-led coalition, maybe they have plans to do that, but still, this only happens when ISIS emerges. And ISIS recently there were a lot of attacks inside Syria, by the way, around Homs, Tadmor, in many areas. So in this case, maybe the US-led coalition also will be making bases or making more activities and more control in that area. So in this chaos, every faction vying to control and influence over the country's future direction. So that's what's happening now, actually.
Yeah, on the
sorry,
go ahead.
if I can just interject
Please
about about the last part about the US. Right now the negotiations over Kobani and basically over the whole future of northern Syria, because Kobani is really kind of a linchpin, right? It's the canary in the coal mine, as crappy as it feels to say that. But essentially there's kind of these two unstoppable forces meeting each other, right? The Turkey wants nothing short of not just the SDF to withdraw, but Turkey wants to move into that region. For them, because even if the SDF said, okay, we will withdraw, but let's have an international peacekeeping force or a US peacekeeping force, right? Or some other type of force. This is something that's not acceptable to Turkey, right? That they're the ones that want to be here. The wild card here is going to be Trump. And I think this is why Turkey and the SNA are pushing so much. And I think Hisham mentioned this as well, that it's leading up to inauguration. And I think that they're thinking, okay, we want to get as much possible done before Trump comes in, because Trump is unpredictable. Now, Trump, of course, was responsible for this disastrous withdrawal of 2019 that saw Turkey moving in and taking, and the SNA moving in and taking Serikani and Tel Abyad. And Trump has even stated, even during Biden's presidency and even very recently, has stated that he wants to do a total withdrawal from Syria, right? And it's a wild card because even though he's made these intentions clear, there are a few factors that may stop a total withdrawal. One is the backlash that he faced for the 2019 withdrawal. I mean, it was immense and it was bipartisan. It wasn't the Democrats, it wasn't the Republicans, it was everybody that was really, really condemning him very strongly, to the point that he had to backstep, right? It was too late for Serikani and too late for Tel Abyad, but he had to backpedal to the point that now there are still US troops there. Two is that some of his advisors, they are quite hawkish and they are quite anti-Iran, which means that they would see an advantage in having a loyal US partner force like the SDF to counter Iranian presence in the region. And I also think that some of his advisors, and also Trump himself, they all condemned the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal by Biden. And I think that they don't want a repeat of that. They don't want something like that to make them look bad. But again, Trump is very, very unpredictable. So I think only time is going to tell what will actually happen.
Anything else to add, Hisham?
Yeah, actually, in addition to that, Turkey is pushing on the SDF area. SDF area, from within, from internal, they have big challenges actually. From the day of the regime collapse and the HTS, the SNA, backed by Turkey, their media, they are triggering people, Arab people in the SDF area to revolt against it. And they are using this in their media discourse that all Syria is liberated except the Northeast. The Northeast is still not liberated. They use the term liberation with the areas that are taken from the Syrian regime after the collapse of the regime. And they still consider the SDF is a regime ally, which is not true to large extent, of course. But they kept using this with the Arab tribes, and the Arab tribes, of course, there were a lot of security incidents, demonstrations against SDF in the past few weeks, and that posed an additional challenge to the SDF actually. So everybody is waiting the 20th of January Still, of course, it's not unpredictable, but as a Syrian Kurd, I mean, everybody says, although Trump is not predictable, but this time maybe it will be a little bit different. I mean, because giving all spaces to Turkey, or Turkey is a U.S. ally, but still is not that safe for the area. I mean, they are opening the way for ISIS, for Iran even, to some way or another. So that's threatening, of course. And we hope this, let's say, the future is uncertain, of course. Nobody knows what will happen. But there are some, let's say, logical things on the ground that they may happen. I mean, as we can see in Syria, it may be looking like the Egyptian scenario, maybe, because Egypt was ruled for decades by Mubarak and Sadat and others, and the Muslim Brotherhood, they were struggling for the power. And when they got the power, it's as if like give them a chance as the majority, the Muslim majority, they want to get to power, they want to control, they want to rule. But it turned that they failed after 1 year. And I guess the same scenario in Syria, the HTS, they will be given a chance. Now, the majority, the Muslim Sunni, are very happy with it, but still, every day, people are shocked by many decisions that are very strange to the Syrian cultural life, especially its multi-cultural and ethnic and religious country. So I think the HTS, let's say, administration now will not be taking long, actually. Maybe a few months, maybe maximum 1 year, like the same happened in Egypt. And after that, he will be toppled as well.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. I was going to ask about what what Trump means, and we covered that. So yeah, just to kind of dig into what you just said and reassess that a little bit. I had Thomas Schmediger on my program talking about Syria, which he has studied a lot, and talking specifically about what you were just mentioning, that I think some people have said, okay, HTS is in there, and these are people that may or may not know much about Syria. Oh, okay, radical Islam, fundamentalist Islam has taken over. That's it. Syria's done or whatever. but I think what he was saying is that this history, this tradition that you're talking about, multicultural, secular, in a lot of cases, tradition, especially in Damascus, is going to make something like that extremely difficult for HTS to pull off. That if they want to try to rule in that way, that it's going to be a very difficult process for them, and they're going to face many obstacles, much protest, much backlash from citizens, from the people in Syria. And it sounds like you have that same assessment. I mean, they suspended the constitution. They said elections in 4 years or something. That was the last thing I heard HTS saying. But you're saying that they're probably going to fail sooner than that. If they continue to do the things they're doing. Is that an accurate assessment of what you said, Hisham?
Yeah, exactly. Especially nowadays, I mean, we are shocked by the news, not every day, I mean, every hour. Every
Right.
hour there are new decisions by the new administration in Damascus. People are shocked. I mean, especially yesterday, people have been very angry with the change on the school curriculum, actually. There were a lot of terms have been used in Syria in the school curriculum, and they changed them into Islamic terms.
Can you give a couple examples of that? Because sometimes that stuff doesn't come across all the way to our media.
Actually, I have dozens of pages. I can pick very quickly.
Yeah, just a couple, just so we get an idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. For example, the term martyr is the soldier who died for defending the country. That was in the school curriculum taught over 5 decades in Syria. Now they changed it. The martyr is the one who dies for defending the religion, Islam only. So it's something shocking for people. So what about those Christians, those the others who died for this country? I mean, they are not. Of course, it's the matter of martyr is not only symbolic. I mean, it's even like something social in the Syrian culture. I mean, when you say this is martyr, so the other is not martyr, it means the other is very low rank, is very not rejected, not considered Syrian, etc. It's a national issue, actually. This is one of the things I remember that people were talking about it a lot. And of course, there were like dozens of pages, and each page containing like 20, 30 terms have been used, and they are all changed now into Islamic terms. Not
I know the biggest one that stood out to me was the removal of anything referring to evolution, or evolution or human evolution. This was banned.
You
Any
cut out a
reference
little bit
to
there, Lucas. You were talking about evolution? Is that what you said?
yeah. So they one of the terms that they removed from the Syrian curriculum was evolution. So the theory of evolution, human evolution, the evolution of the human mind, right?
Yeah.
They don't use this anymore. Any references to non-Abrahamic gods or pagan gods or religion, these are removed. And also any content that's critical of Turkey or the Ottomans. So the Syrian curriculum was using Ottoman occupation for the pre-France era Ottoman occupation of Syria, and this is being changed from occupation to administration.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that sounds like, it sounds similar in some ways to some of the stuff that is going on with the very conservative people in the U.S., like in Florida and places like that, where they're making all these changes to the curriculum. They're making many changes in what can be taught, what books can be brought, put into the libraries and things like that. And it's like, it's something that no, teacher would ever be able to keep up with. You're talking about 12 pages in like some short period of time. There's no way. And so what that does, I think, is has a chilling effect potentially, or has the potential to have a chilling effect, because nobody knows what they can or can't say. So people may self-censor. And I don't know if that's the case here, if there's actually, people actively organizing against that already. But yeah, there's some similarities there with the taking on the education piece as a key piece to establishing more one religion based order. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot more questions. I mean, this is, again, like you said, this is something that we're going to see like developing, especially over the next few weeks here, and as we get to the 20th of January. Are there any other, last thoughts that either of y'all have about, what we've seen over the last month, or what we can expect to see, with Trump, or with HTS, or in the Kurdish regions? What, is there anything else you want to leave folks with?
For me, I think regarding, you mentioned minorities, and you and Hisham both talked about Syria as kind of a multi-ethnic society, as a pluralist society, and how that may make it difficult for HTS to rule. I think Jolani is one of the wild cards here, because I don't think he's stupid. I think he's incredibly diplomatic. And you can see that, I mean, he made the statement. He said, Syria is not going to become Afghanistan. And he knows exactly what he's doing with this kind of statement, right? He says, I believe in women's education. He says, I believe in preserving minority rights. He's held meetings with Druze. He's held meetings with Christians, right? When there's incidents like a Christmas tree gets burned, or this or that happens, he always condemns it, right? How much of this is talk? I don't know, because I'm not inside Jolani's head. I think it probably is a lot of talk, but I think this is a very smart move on his part. And I think it's also a very smart move on his part that he's not challenging Israel. He's not challenging any major state. Despite he's Jolani, right? He's from the Jolan. But he really hasn't said much about the Israeli strikes on Syria. And until now, he's not saying it. And he's not going to fight Israel. And I think that's because he's looked around him and he's seen what happens to the countries who make enemies with Israel, and what happens to countries that at least maintain a sense of cordiality with Israel. Now, in terms of how he administers internally, I don't know if this is going to be like a boiling the frog situation where he starts out saying, yeah, all minorities are welcome and I believe in women's education and blah, blah, blah. And then these are all going to be very slow changes. I think if he can manage to do this, then he might be successful in prolonging HTS's hold over Syria. I think if he came out right away and said, like the Taliban just banned windows, I think, so that people can't see women. I think if he comes right out with this, it's going to be very difficult because these sanctions, the worldwide sanctions on Syria are going to continue, and it's going to make life harder for Syrian people, and then the people aren't going to support him. So I think that if his goal is to institute an Islamist society, I think he knows very well that he has to do very slowly and incrementally, so that people don't freak out and there's not all this immediate backlash, both internationally and within the country as well. But yeah, I think that if he tries to go overboard, that it's going to be very difficult for him. I think that the what's going to happen to the Kurdish regions, or I should say the north and east, right? I always say I think it's very easy to say these are Kurdish regions, and a lot of these regions are Kurdish majority, but these regions also in the north and east are pluralistic. There's lots of Arabs, lots of Kurds, lots of Christian minority groups in these regions. I think the Northeast is the area to keep an eye on because, as Hisham mentioned, there is this, even among the Syrians that I'm in Europe, right? And of course, when Assad fell, everyone went to the parliament and they're waving the green flags and they're so excited. I think a lot of them weren't excited once their asylum applications got frozen, but a lot of them were kind of celebrating this. But then they're continuing to post on social media and saying, we're going to go and liberate Hasakeh, and we're going to go and liberate Raqqa next, and we're going to go and liberate Deir ez-Zor, and yeah, to them it's not finished. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see in the next few months, and especially after Trump becomes president, what will happen, because there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah,
Hisham?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last point I would like just to highlight it is that SDF or the Kurdish region, they have been very strong in many hard times actually. And this time they are not in a crisis, by the way. They are still the strongest part, relatively strongest part, or the safest part, or the best part, or in Syria. I mean, comparing to the others. In terms of forces, I mean, the number of SDF forces elements exceeding 100,000, while the HTS is 15 or to 20,000, and the SNA is about 70. So, I mean, they are still. And in addition, the SDF is supported by the US-led coalition by let's say dozens of countries in the world. They are not listed on the terrorist list, while the others, the HTS, are still listed on the terrorist list. So as Lucas started, Jawlani has a lot of challenges actually. So yeah, maybe he's pragmatic and he's wearing the tie and the new style, and maybe he will get shorts. Maybe he will go to the disco as well, just for empowerment, just to get the authority first. Yeah, the Syrian people, many people aware of this, that he is negotiating for a lot of things, but at the same time they are concerned about the future, because ISIS in 2014, when they started their rule, they didn't start with beheading people. They started with being very kind and very good to people, and Nusra as well in many areas. But after empowerment, the other face, the ugly face, started to appear. So hopefully the HTS, if they can control the situation this way, that will be a bit positive. I mean, whatever happens for the Kurdish areas, for SDF, it will be good. I mean, I don't see disastrous scenarios like in 2018 and 19. All the time we were concerned that Turkish invasion, but this time I don't think Turkey is thinking of invasion because they already have now business in Syria, in Damascus, in other areas. So, and of course, they have challenges. So I think we are on the safe side, I guess.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate speaking with y'all, and we'll be interested to see how things develop. And yeah, very much pulling for success for people of Syria of many different backgrounds to have a a society that works for everyone, which is what I encourage, which is what I hope for everyone across the globe, is that we can build a society that works for all of us and that supports us. I really appreciate your time.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
And that's our special interview. Thanks for listening. Solidarity.
This has been a Socialist News and Views special interview.